everybody. Welcome to your second remote lesson for Year 1 Geography. This one is on modern shipping, and as you can see you're going to need pages 50 to 58 of your module booklet. We're going to be working through those bullet points. So if we had had a face-to-face lesson this week, this would have taken 3 hours. It's quite a big lesson. I think it's one of the best lessons of this module, but then I'm probably biased. So it is quite a lot, and you will probably want to pause this YouTube to have a short break and come back to it and things, because it is going to be quite a lot of information, but you can pause and do that as you want to. Before I get started, the other thing I just want to say is if I have a coughing fit in the middle of this, I massively apologise. If it's a really bad one, then I'll stop and restart. But it's quite lucky that college decided that we would do remote teaching this week, because I have developed a cough. So I've had a test and I'm waiting on the results. Anyway, that's what we're doing. If you get lost and confused, come back to slide 1, and these are the bullet points that we're working through. Okay, so you should have page 50, maybe a piece of paper for notes, and ready to go. The first thing that you need to know then is just that the modern shipping industry is massively important. So it comes down to these sort of things really, and you have this infographic at the top of page 50. The statistic I'd most like you to remember is that one. 90% of world trade is carried by international shipping. Yes, certain things move around the planet on aeroplanes, but actually aeroplanes move people more than they move stuff. Most of the world's stuff is moved about by ships. It's heavily regulated, as you would expect, and it's the least environmentally damaging form of transport. So it's a really, really important industry. But as I said, that's really the bit for us. And to link that back to a previous lesson, we've been talking about why is having a coastline a good thing, and why is being landlocked quite tricky, and this is a significant part of that. If you've got a coastline, you can get involved in this much more easily. And the second thing that you need to know about shipping is something called containerization. All right, this is a process. It's a very simple process, to be honest. What containerization has done, I'll do that first and I'll tell you what it is it's massively helped globalization, because containerization reduced the cost of shipping, okay? And essentially, there was a trucker called Malcolm P. McLean, his name is written at the bottom of page 50, and he was a truck driver. And what he was doing then is he was driving his lorry to a port like this, and then what would have had to have happened is somebody, a person, or using a forklift, but you would have to take the contents of the lorry and put it on the ship, and then you would sail that ship across the world, and then people at the other end would have to take all the stuff out of the ship and put it on a lorry. And he just realised that why don't we have boxes, which are containers, shipping containers. If you have boxes and they're all a very standard international size, you can just move the box. So these boxes can be lifted off the lorry by these cranes, these yellow cranes here. They can be then lifted on the ship. They can be lifted onto trains. Because the boxes are an agreed international size, and there are two sizes, there's a 20-foot shipping container and a 40-foot shipping container, so the lengths vary but everything else is the same, you can just stack them up. And this brilliant invention called containerization made shipping so much cheaper, because you didn't need so many people. It was a much quicker process to load and unload a ship, and it's just transformed everything really. So containerization is what revolutionized everything. Now I'm not going to show you these clips, but I'm just going to introduce them to you. So this one, as you can see, is only 4 minutes. Please watch it. And it's the short story of Malcolm McLean and Containerization by Maersk, who are one of the most famous shipping companies in the world. And this one, this is brilliant. I really, really like this. So the BBC decided to try and explain containerization by essentially buying a shipping container, which they then painted in kind of the red colour with the white BBC writing. And then they just allowed that shipping container to become part of the international shipping industry. So it could be hired and whatever by whoever. And then they tracked it around the world with videos and photographs and stuff. And they tracked it for a year. And it really helps you understand sort of what the international shipping industry is all about. So I would really, really like it, please, if you could watch those 2 YouTube videos. It's a bit like a Russian doll, isn't it? You've got a YouTube within a YouTube. It's a bit weird. But yeah, watch those, please. And I will give you access to this PowerPoint in both Microsoft Teams and also on email. So whichever is your preference, you will have access to this, and then you can open the hyperlinks. And what's happened ever since Malcolm P. McLean came up with containerization, which was quite a long time ago, it was in the 1950s. But what's gradually happened is, as you know, technology has improved and engineers have worked out bigger and better possibilities. What's happened is that container ships have got bigger and bigger and bigger. And you have this diagram at the bottom of page 51. Obviously, I don't need you to remember it. I just need you to know that container ships, there we are getting bigger and bigger over the years. And the importance of that is something called economies of scale, which I'm going to teach you in a minute. This is a slightly different diagram. It's the same basic principle. So not only have container ships got wider, so they can hold more stuff, they've also got considerably longer. And we are now at a point, so the biggest container ships can carry 22,000 of the small boxes, or 11,000 of the big ones. I've put here what TEU stands for. So it's 20-foot equivalent unit. So the small shipping containers, they could hold 22,000. The double length ones, they could hold 11,000. That's bonkers, isn't it? So just to go back, in case you're a little bit confused about everything, the importance of shipping is just that it's the most important form of transport, 90% of trade, least environmentally damaging. Containerization is what we've just said. It's that the idea that you put stuff in boxes and you just move the box. You don't have to unload and load everything. It's much quicker, it's much simpler, it's much cheaper. We're now talking about economies of scale, and you are going to need to jot some notes down about this for yourself. So you've got a little bit of space on page 51, possibly a little bit of space on page 52. Let me explain it, and then you can decide how you take these notes. Okay, so I've got 2 options for you. You might find one easier to understand than the other. You don't need both, you just pick whichever one makes more sense. So you've probably heard that you can buy a washing powder called Persil. So here you can see that in this supermarket, and I can't remember which one it is, sorry, in this supermarket you could buy 3 different size boxes. Now clearly the biggest box is the most expensive. £8 is definitely more expensive than £3, but look at the amount per wash. 30p a wash, 17.8p a wash. Or if you want to do it slightly differently, I worked out the weight. So if I wanted to buy the 3.185 kilograms, but I wanted to buy it in small boxes, so I just did a tiny bit of maths, I would pay £13.62 for the same amount of Persil. The bigger box is cheaper per unit, per wash, if you like, because this amount of Persil compared to, say, 4 boxes of this, you've got less packaging, less printing, less raw materials for the packaging, etc., etc. Things that are done on a bigger scale work out cheaper in the end, all right? Or, if you didn't like Persil, building materials. Now, I only know about building materials because we, like lots of people in lockdown this year, we decided to do a few little building projects around the house. So, sharp sand, if you buy it in a small bag, it will cost you £1.90. If you buy a bulk bag, which is 30 of these roughly, you will pay £42. Obviously, the big bag of sand is more expensive, but if you wanted to buy this amount of sand in individual bags, you would pay £57. It is cheaper to do things on a larger scale, and that is what we're trying to say about container ships. As they have got bigger and bigger, the cost of shipping has gone down and down. All right, that's our key idea. As container ships have got bigger and bigger, the cost of shipping has gone down and down. So I will leave you to rewind and do whatever it is you need to do to get your head around that. And our summative point, so I'm just going to have a slurp of drink. Our summative point is that shipping is now incredibly cheap. And I've just put a few facts and figures up on the screen. You can jot down 1 or 2 of them if you want to. It's the third one that just seems so incredibly bonkers to me. Shipping is so cheap, it makes more financial sense for Scottish cod to be sent to China to be filleted, so cut into pieces, or for prawns to have their shells taken off, and then they get sent back to the UK. It's like, that's bonkers, isn't it? But that's how cheap shipping has become, and it's all because of economies of scale and containerization. Just to give you a sense of how much shipping costs, so if you were trying to import or export something to or from the UK, so you get a sense of the prices there. Some countries are very, very cheap. The further you have to travel, obviously, the more expensive it becomes because of fuel and staffing and all of that. But none of that it's not out of the way money, is it? If you could fill, so a 20-foot shipping container, the small version, will roughly fit the furniture and belongings from a 3-bedroom house. So a 20-foot container will carry a huge amount of stuff, and therefore, you know, per item that you've got in that container, the shipping cost is not that ridiculous. Or you could look at a pair of jeans. Jeans have generally travelled about 60,000 kilometres before you wear them, because to take advantage of where raw materials are cheapest, where labour is cheapest, where maybe you can get away with more health and safety restrictions, etc. Look how many journeys the kind of parts of your jeans make before you even put them on. 60,000 kilometres. All right, so that's the moral of the story, ladies and gents. Shipping is very, very cheap. And it's all because of containerisation and economies of scale. Okay, so we've done the first 3 bullet points, and we're on to the importance of canals, ladies and gents. So for this, I want you to look at the map at the bottom of page 52 and the top of page, oh no, sorry. I did have one just little tiny point to make, apologies. So, container ships are not able to get any bigger anymore. They have reached what's called, I love this phrase, Malacca Max. Now, what on earth is Malacca Max? Well, let me introduce you to the Strait of Malacca. Now, this is not a man-made thing. This is a natural piece of water between, as you can see, Malaysia and Indonesia, Singapore, etc. If container ships got any bigger than they currently are, they would not fit through the Strait of Malacca. So they are at Malacca Max. And if shipping is going to get any cheaper, we need to maybe think about how we're going to get around that. And I'll pick up on that point in a minute. So Straits of Malacca, it's only a name drop thing, but yeah, ships are at their maximum size at the moment. So here's the maximum sizes that you can have for certain shipping lanes that we'll talk about shortly. Panamax, they've just widened the Panama Canal, so you can fit a much bigger ship through than you used to be able to. Suezmax and Malacca Max. They cannot get any bigger than that if they want to fit through. So yeah, economies of scale are sort of on hold for a minute, but I'll pick up on that idea. Right, apologies. Now we're talking about canals. So there are two canals that you need to know about, the Panama Canal and the Suez Canal, because they're incredibly important for shipping. Here is a very rough map to show you kind of the most popular routes for ships to take. And you can see that probably one of the most used is this one here. The Suez Canal, ladies and gents, is there. Okay, there. So it means you don't have to go round the tip of Africa. Some ships do, as you can clearly see, and that will be for a whole host of reasons, possibly avoiding Somalia. They may actually need to pick stuff up from South Africa or drop it off. But as you can see, that's very much a popular route. The Panama Canal is here. And it's very important to try and avoid this, because this part of the world's water has a nickname, and it's called the graveyard of sailors. So there are kind of huge numbers of shipwrecks and lots of people have lost their lives there. So actually for safety, the Panama Canal is probably more important than the Suez. So you've got this map on page 53. So you can just see the Suez Canal and how much it saves you in terms of journey time. That's going to be less fuel. It's going to be paying the people on board your ship less money because you don't need to pay them for such a long time. So the Suez Canal is very important. The Panama Canal is there. And as I say, it avoids the very dangerous Cape Horn, the graveyard of sailors. So you just literally need to know that the Suez and Panama Canals are very, very important. Now, I mentioned the Straits of Malacca. The Straits of Malacca are natural, and the Straits of Malacca are here. It's being considered by Thailand that they might build a third globally important canal called the Kra Canal. Now, they have not built this yet, but it's being considered, because if you could avoid the Straits of Malacca, which are here, you could then potentially begin to make ships bigger again. So it's something, but it would obviously cost Thailand a huge amount of money, but they could make money because what happens, it's a bit like, they don't do it now, but when you used to drive over the bridge into Wales, you used to have to pay money, or if you've come home from Cornwall, you have to pay money. You pay a toll. Ships that go through the Suez and Panama canals have to pay a toll, and so it's possible sorry, that Thailand may do this in the future, but maybe not, because you may recall we've talked previously about the fact that there's this little old thing called climate change, which is meaning that the ice of the Arctic is melting. And we talked about how there are 5 countries around the North Pole who are currently sort of racing currently racing to prove that they own the resources of the Arctic. Well, the other thing that might be possible is when all the ice melts, there might be a new shipping route between Europe and Asia. And if you notice, the blue line is considerably shorter than the red line, so it would actually be even quicker again. Then you would avoid the Straits of Malacca here, you would avoid the Suez Canal as well. So they might not build the Kra Canal because they might build it at this, huge billions of pounds expense, and then realise that nobody uses it anyway because they're all taking a completely different route. So it's just one of those to sort of be aware of. Okay, so that is the importance of canals, which brings us to oil tankers. Remember, ladies and gents, if at any point you just need to pause and go and get a cup of tea or whatever, this is quite a lot of information. So do what you need to do to kind of keep your brain active. Oil, fossil fuel, we've talked about that in class, one of the 3 fossil fuels, but definitely the most important of the 3, because we talked a little bit about I'll just take a sip of water, sorry. We talked about how useful it is. Fractional distillation means you get petrol, diesel, kerosene, heavy diesel. These are all the fuels of modern transport, basically. You can use it for 6,000 different products, plastics, medicines, fabrics. Like, oil is just so valuable for modern life. Some countries have it, every country of the world needs it. So what you end up with is international trade in oil. Okay, people buy and sell oil and it gets transported all around the world in ships. So that's pretty much all you need to know about oil tankers, is that there's this very important global trade in oil because every country needs it. And the way that the vast majority of that oil gets sent from, say, the Middle East to the UK or whatever is on these massive oil tankers. You don't need to remember their different names, but they're huge. I mean, they're ULCC. I think it stands for ultra large cargo carrier, something like that. It's some ridiculous name, but they're massive, great big things. So what you need to know, this is on page 54 now, is an oil choke point. And I've used the photograph on screen to try and help you visualise what on earth we're talking about. If you're unlucky enough to be on the motorway and 3 lanes have to go into 1 lane, you end up in a traffic jam, don't you? It's inevitable, because you've got 3 lanes of cars trying to squeeze into 1 lane, and it all becomes a nightmare, and traffic starts to back up and people start to get grumpy. And an oil choke point is essentially that exact idea. It's a very narrow place where oil tankers have to queue. All right, so that visualization on screen is sort of exactly what we're talking about. There are a few around the world. Fairly obviously, the Straits of Malacca that I've already talked about, because it's a narrow part of the sea, oil tankers sort of get stuck there and have to queue up. The Panama Canal, the Suez Canal. But actually, weirdly for this, we are much more interested in this one. So this is a little case study for you, please. The Straits of Malacca, the Panama Canal and the Suez Canal are just name drops. You just need to know they exist and like 1 sentence about them. The Strait of Hormuz is your case study of an oil choke point, okay? So why is it so important? Well, the Strait of Hormuz is in the Persian Gulf, and a good sort of 75%-ish of the world's oil is in the Middle East. Therefore, a considerable chunk of the world's oil has to pass through the Strait of Hormuz to be delivered to the various countries around the world who have bought it. All right, so the Strait of Hormuz. You've got Iran and Oman, all right, here. Now, at its narrowest point, it is 21 miles. You might want to do some drawing on the bottom of page 54, like you could do a little sketch maybe of it. But I want to just remind you of the law of the sea. So we've talked about the law of the sea and how it's this really brilliant law created by the United Nations. And what it does is it makes sure that everybody knows who's, what's what, and it should keep what we call geopolitical stability. So the countries of the world shouldn't need to fall out with each other because of the law of the sea. Well, let me just remind you about the 12-mile territorial sea. The first 12 miles of sea off your coastline are part of your country. They're part of your territory. You get to set the rules. You can say who can come in or out in terms of shipping. The Strait of Hormuz is 21 miles wide. The Territorial Sea is 12. So 12 miles for Iran, 12 miles for Oman. Well, that is more than 21, isn't it? So what we have here is a choke point. It's already a very, very narrow part of the sea that, if we had some massive international disagreement, could be blockaded. Iran and Oman, between them, could really disrupt international trade of oil. Or if one of them wanted to blockade their half, then you're going to find that the choke point is even narrower than it was before, and that's going to make things even harder. So this is the oil choke point that we most worry about because of the potential ramifications of either of these countries being difficult, I suppose. So you can see 20% of the daily total of oil passes through on a typical day. It's one of the most important supply routes, and there's a lot of geopolitical tension here, a huge amount. So in Iran's confrontation with the West, Iran and the West have a complicated relationship, is the phrase I would go for. But the reason that we try not to upset Iran too much is that they have the ability to block the most important oil transit choke point. And it's estimated, it's never happened, so we can only guess and estimate, but they reckon that prices would at least quadruple within sort of 24 hours. So if you imagine the ramifications of the price of oil quadrupling, that is petrol, diesel, air tickets, shipping. Now, shipping. If 90% of the world's stuff is transported by ship, and ships run on a version of oil, I think it's heavy diesel that ships run on, which comes from crude oil. If oil gets more expensive, shipping gets more expensive, everything gets more expensive. Now in 2019, it started kicking off quite badly in the Strait of Hormuz, and I've included two little hyperlinks there that you could have a look at. It did settle down again, but it's a part of the world that does come up in the news more frequently than you would probably like. And the thing about it is, if you see the Strait of Hormuz in the news, it could affect your daily life by the means that I've just told you. So if anything happens in the Strait of Hormuz, the price of oil goes up. If the price of oil goes up, many aspects of your daily life are affected. So oil choke points, much more important than people generally realise. So you've got pages 54 and 55 on those, but you've also deliberately got some room for drawings and notes. So you might want to do yourself a little map. You might want to remind yourself here about the Territorial Sea. You might want to check out those hyperlinks and take a few extra notes. But the Strait of Hormuz is quite a small case study, but a case study nonetheless. And then I've just included that I'm not going to talk about at all. But notice that that is from July 2019. So it's quite a good little name drop for sort of geopolitics, geopolitical confrontation, that sort of stuff. Right, and that brings us to our final part of this. Remember, if you need a break, pause, you can come back to it in a bit after you've had a cup of tea or whatever. So the final part of modern shipping is piracy, or sea terrorism, or maritime security, and it begins on page 56 of your module booklet. Why on earth have I put an image of Johnny Depp? Well, you can call modern day pirates, but the problem is, if you start talking about pirates, the image that most people get in their head is a kind of Pirates of the Caribbean kids cartoon. They're sort of rebels, but they're quite funny and they're nice people, and maybe it's a bit of a misunderstanding about excuse me, about what a pirate actually is. So in fact, it's becoming more popular to refer to this as sea terrorism. But anyway, whichever name you want to go with, all three of those are about the same thing. Right. Just a reminder that if you've got access to this film, I think it is on Netflix. It might be on other streaming services. I've put a YouTube clip of the trailer there if you want to remind yourself. I think we did watch it in induction, but anyway, there is a YouTube clip of the trailer there. So Captain Phillips is an excellent film that will really help you understand this part of the module. It's based on a true story, and yeah, it's an excellent film. So a bit of reading around the subject for you. You could watch a movie for this bit. We are back to our usual set of notes here: basics, causes, impacts, responses. You can either have notes like this, or you could just do some highlighting in your module booklet, maybe with 4 different colours. I don't mind, but get yourself organised, pause if you need to, and then we're ready. Okay, so piracy is an international problem, which is why it's relevant in this module, because global governance is about trying to find global solutions to global problems, and piracy very much is a global problem. Attacks have been, we think, reducing in recent years. I will open this. This is a map that you could spend ages on if you're interested. Because basically, if you click on every single marker, it will tell you what the incident was. And look, there's a colour coding. So attempted, that means that the pirates actually got on board the ship, shot at, hijacked. That's quite scary. And suspicious, so that's maybe the least scary of them all. But this is live. You can zoom in, you can click on them all. And what I would say is everyone remembers Somalia, and we are going to talk about Somalia today, but that's old news. You don't get many attacks off Somalia. West Africa is very much our hotspot at the moment, but also quite a lot around Asia. So yeah, spend as much time on that hyperlink as you feel you want to. So that's about it. Now, piracy, I suppose, is a business opportunity. It's a bit like human trafficking. It's all about the economics. Neither of them are particularly nice ways to make money, but if you're desperate and you're prepared to commit criminal acts in order to make money, then there will be people who are prepared to do that. So it's all about economics and making money. So basics, couple of names of areas maybe. You might want to put some numbers from the graph. You've got a bit of stuff on page 56 which says during the last decade we've witnessed steady growth of the piracy phenomenon. That's a great phrase, isn't it? In both frequency and intensity of attacks. Okay, so causes. Now, I'm going to explain Somalia and Sierra Leone to you. There's a teeny space for notes on page 56, but I've possibly not left enough. Right, so Somalia. It's old news, okay, so I do very much need you to know that you do not get many attacks off the coast of Somalia anymore, okay, but it's the one everyone's heard of, and we can talk about it in hindsight, that's fine. Somalia is a country with fairly significant issues. The government collapsed, war broke out, the country was undefended, okay, they didn't have any military protecting them. And foreign ships, very naughty, very immoral foreign ships, started fishing, so taking their resources out of their EEZ. Remember, that's the 200 miles where you are entitled to all of the resources. So other ships started nicking their fish and also polluting in their waters, which is rude, isn't it? And what the piracy of Somalia started out with is actually reasonably understandable. Fishermen started going out to protect their resources, to try and get rid of these foreign ships who were stealing their fish and polluting their waters. But unfortunately, what they realised is that actually threatening other ships was quite a good way to make money. And that is where the whole piracy situation in Somalia started out from. All right, so I'm not condoning it, but I'm saying maybe if you come at it from that direction, maybe you can sort of understand it a bit better. Now, West Africa is the current hotspot. And this BBC News clip, I'll just open it briefly. Again, I'm not going to show you the whole thing, but it's massively, massively worth watching. Chinese trawlers, oops, sorry folks, appear to be fishing in West Africa's EEZs. Now, some of them are allowed to, some of them aren't. Some of them are fishing in an illegal way. What they're doing, seemingly, is taking quite a lot of fish out of West African seas, which means that local fishermen are not catching many fish. It's causing economic problems for those countries, etc. So again, I'm not condoning piracy as a way of making money, but what I'm saying is maybe if we find out the cause of the piracy, we can begin to at least attempt to understand it. Okay, so I would really highly recommend that you watch that. And I just want to go back here. So you might remember from that live piracy map that this is the current piracy hotspot. Well, the other thing I'd just like to mention very briefly is that here is a country called Nigeria, which is a country with a lot of oil. And some of the oil will obviously be shipped from Nigeria. It's possible that that is part of the explanation for West Africa as well. You generally find wherever there is oil, there is geopolitical stuff going on. So I think there's probably a couple of reasons why West Africa is a current hotspot. Okay. Impacts, effects. We basically just need to know one thing. I've given you quite a lot of information on pages 56 and 57 about this, but essentially it all makes the same point. Trying to get away from pirates or trying to protect your ship against pirates costs a lot of money. So for example, bottom of page 56, Frontline Limited, the world's largest supertanker fleet, estimates that the diversion costs for one of their ships, so if you wanted to just not go through a pirate infested area, you wanted to avoid it, for one of their ships it will cost about $100,000. So that's pretty massive, isn't it? There is also the fuel used to sail faster to avoid pirates. Shippers must pay higher insurance premiums. Harden ships, that means protect them with barbed wire, razor wire, that sort of thing. Just the barbed wire for one ship can cost $10,000. Hire security crews. Now we'll be talking about that. You could hire yourself some armed guards. Great, very effective, very expensive. Provide training, equipment, and then by the time we get to the end of this section, it's kind of, you've got numbers in the billions and millions. The main impact of piracy is that it makes shipping more expensive. So that is a problem for international trade, and that's why we sort of worry about it. Now, morally, this is the second one's more important, but for Geography A-level, it's less important. The effects on victims would be pretty extensive, and I've just included a BBC hyperlink about a couple, I've forgotten their names now. Anyway, a couple who were on a sailing holiday and got kidnapped by Somali pirates who were hoping for a ransom. And if you watch Captain Phillips, you will get a sense that, you know, the crew of that ship were pretty traumatised as well. So that is worth us remembering, but for Geography A-level, you need to mostly emphasise the fact that piracy makes shipping more expensive. Okay, what do we do about it? Well, I've sort of given you a sneak preview of that already, because the responses are what cost us the money. So you can try to avoid pirate hotspots. You can sail faster to try and make sure that it's really difficult for the pirates to get onto your ship. You can cover your ship in barbed wire. You can do this. This is using hoses to try and prevent the pirates from being able to get on board your ship. And if you watch Captain Phillips, they talk about that. You could hire armed guards. So you can just see a pirate, I think they call them skiffs. They're little tiny boats. You can see a skiff coming towards the ship. And what this ship has done is they've hired armed guards to protect the ship. Now, my understanding is they're not supposed to fire at the people, like they're not shooting to kill, they are shooting to scare them. You can see all the barbed wire, look, down the ship as well. So you can use barbed wire to try and stop them getting on. You can hire armed guards. Where's that? So they're just trying to scare them and frighten them. Now, that's a brilliantly effective solution, it has to be said, but you think how much I've got no idea. I've never hired an armed guard. I've had absolutely no need to do that. But you imagine how much it must cost to hire, you know, a number of trained armed guards to protect your ship. It's going to be super expensive, isn't it? And what it goes on to say on pages 57 and 58, which is really helpful because it's what the module is all about. What we need is international measures. We need, as a planet, to think about what we are going to do about international piracy, which is why we learn about it in a module called Global Governance, because it's an international problem, it needs an international solution, and we don't have one as yet. Okay, now the very, very weird finish to this. You can mention this in exams if you want, but you don't have to. This is a very, very strange thing, and that's why I'm showing you a hyperlink, because if I told you this, you would just not believe me. There is something about the music of lovely, wonderful Britney Spears that seems to frighten Somali pirates. And so for a period of time, they were playing Britney Spears music to actually get rid of Somali pirates. I know that is really odd, but for some reason it worked. I have no idea how many different artists they tried before they realised that Britney Spears had the biggest impact. Who knows? Anyway, weird, isn't it? Okay, I have exciting news. You have reached the end of this. It's a bit of a marathon, wasn't it? So, if you could please, priority number 1, just send me some evidence that you have done some notes from today's video. You could take pictures of your module booklet. You could send me some typed up stuff, don't mind. And then just a reminder that you have got some work over half term. It's all on ocean pollution, and I'm going to put, well, you've already had an email about it. I'm going to also put some information about that in Teams, so that depending on your preference, you can access the homework in one of those 2 places. It's on page 74 of your module booklet, but I've given you quite a lot of hyperlinks of places to find the information. So you've got an immediate job in red, and then a job over the next week or so in green. Okay, well done for surviving that. My cough more or less managed to hold out, which is great. Any questions, as ever, if you could just drop me an email, that would be fantastic. Thanks, folks.